Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies. As we continue with part 6, Charlemagne and the Legend of Roland, from Orders of the Quest The Holy Grail by Manly P. Hall. Charlemagne, from an early illustration preserved in the monastery of St. Callisto in Rome. Charlemagne and the Legend of Roland. Charles the Great, or Charlemagne, King of Franks and Holy Roman Emperor, was born in AD 742 and is remembered by popular historians for the brilliance of his reign, the success of his arms, the number of his wives, and his diet of spitted venison. A considerable part of his life was devoted to the extension and protection of his domains and the quelling of rebellions among his subjects, but he found time in the interludes between his military campaigns to be the moving spirit in an important revival of arts and letters. He not only encouraged scholarship, but practiced it moderately himself, and is believed to have obtained some proficiency in Latin grammar, rhetoric, dialectics, and astronomy. Such intellectual accomplishments were unusual to royalty of the 8th century and resulted in a minimum of grammatical errors in the edicts and legislations. It is probable that he could write and read, but he depended largely upon professional clerks for his extensive knowledge of history and religion. Like Akbar, the great Mughal who attained the distinction of being the world's most highly educated illiterate, Charlemagne found it more economical to hire readers than to burden his mind and time with too much schooling. Although Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Leo III and was presented with the keys to the grave of St. Peter, he was never actually the sovereign of the Romans. His real position was that of protector and defender of the popes. He encouraged a revision of the text of the Latin Vulgate and left a considerable library of old manuscripts and records. He lived beyond his 70th year and is said to have died of pleurisy. The historical Charlemagne became the central figure in an important cycle of myths and legends of profound interest to students of the esoteric tradition. The orders of chivalry were dedicated to the restoration of the primitive Christian church as it existed in the time of the apostles. In order to accomplish this restoration, it was necessary to rediscover the high secrets of the Christian mysteries, the esoteric association of the San Grail, the knighthood of the Round Table, the Knights Templars, the Knights Hospitallers of St. John of Jerusalem, and the Teutonic Knights have been called the military apostles of the religion of love. Heki Thorn describes them as military troubadours who, under the standards of justice and right, fought against the monstrous abuses of the theocratic regime, consoled the widow, perhaps the Gnostic Church, protected the sons of the widow, the followers of Manes, and overthrew giants and dragons, inquisitors and churchmen. The powerful voice of the furious Roland, which made breaches in the granite rocks of the mountains, is the voice of that so-called heresy which found its way into Spain, thus anticipating the saying of Louis XIII, "There are no longer any Pyrenees." In AD 778, Charlemagne invaded Spain, captured Pamplona, and laid siege to Saragossa. In the midst of his campaign, news reached the king of a revolt among his Saxon subjects, and he was forced to abandon the Spanish war and hasten back to the Rhine. Incidentally, perhaps the change in plans was not entirely unwelcome, for the siege of Saragossa was going badly. While withdrawing the main body of his army through the wild gorges and hazardous defiles of the Pyrenees, his rear guard was cut off and completely annihilated by the Basques. These mountaineers attained this single victory by starting avalanches in narrow places along the road and hurling boulders down upon the Franks. Among the generals of Charlemagne's army who perished in this action was Lord, prefect of the Breton March. On this slight historical foundation was built the hero legend of Roland, or Lord, one of the great epics of the Age of Chivalry. In its final form, Chanson de Roland bears little resemblance to sober fact, but it is an excellent example of the allegories ingeniously devised by the troubadours for the perpetuation of their mystery cult. According to the legend of Roland, this culture hero is represented as the nephew of Charlemagne. He is one of the 12 peers, forming the supreme council of the Frankish king. These peers, like the Knights of the Round Table, were nobles of exceptional valor and high integrity, all save one, the perfidious Lord Galahad, whose treachery destroyed the sacred assembly. In the terms of this symbolism, Charlemagne, the initiated Christian king emperor, represents Christ, his 12 peers and the apostles. Roland is John the Beloved, and Galahad is Judas. Thus Charlemagne, the wise and righteous monarch, the glorious king and the preserver of the faith, like Solomon and Arthur, personifying the sun and his peers, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Roland is a Christian Siegfried, a form of the hero of the world. In the legend of Roland, the Baskies vanish entirely, and in their place is the vast army of the Saracens, the host of the unbelievers. The scene of the great battle is still the Pyrenees, and here the 12 peers, including Roland, Oliver, and the valiant Archbishop Turpin, the warrior priest, died together to protect the withdrawal of Charlemagne and the main body of his army. At the time of the actual battle, Charlemagne was only 36 years old, but in the legend he is represented as a venerable man with long white hair and beard. The treason of Galahad is revealed to the king in a dream, and when from a distance he hears the last blast of Roland's war trumpets, he returns to save his beloved nephew, but arrives too late. In the story, he wreaks a terrible vengeance upon the Saracens, but this has no foundation in fact. Lord Galahad is tried for treason, found guilty, and torn to pieces by wild horses. An interesting reference to the court of Prester John occurs in the legends of Roland. In this account, Roland, afflicted with madness, wandered in the wilderness at the court of Charlemagne. The peers resolved to seek the stricken hero, and Astolfo, the poet knight, declared that he would devote himself to the quest. By a happy accident, the winged horse of Atlantes had fallen into the keeping of an Astolfo, mounting the steed of high verse. The poet knight flew beyond the regions of Ethiopia and alighted in the wondrous realm of the mighty Prester John. According to this legend, Prester John was unhappy because he had been unable to cross the great mountains to the spring of eternal life, where old age was unknown and to which death never came. When Prester John attempted to reach this spring, horrible disasters came upon the expedition, and a voice from heaven spoke, "Think not, vain man, to pry into the secret things of the Most High." From that time on, the court of Prester John was afflicted by the presence of 7 harpies that screamed and howled in the air and snatched the food from the banquet tables. And Astolfo, by the blast from his magical horn, dispersed the harpies, and in gratitude, Prester John supplied a band of warriors to assist. And Astolfo, in his search for Roland, although Charlemagne outwardly sustained the papacy, he was the Grand Master of a mystical and philosophical fraternity, which had descended from the Drotts, the Druids, and the Drotts. As an initiate king, he is revealed as a patron of learning and the arts, and the virtual founder of the university system in Europe. He enriched the cloister schools, broadened their scope, and introduced many useful branches of secular instruction. His wars against the Saracens merely signified his victory over the subversive, anti-social forces of ignorance. Wagner, in his mystical music drama, Parsifal, places the magical garden of Klingsor the sorcerer, in a valley of Moorish Spain. In the original presentation of the opera, Klingsor was costumed as a Near Eastern potentate, and the flower maidens, whom he controlled by his enchantments, were dressed like houris of the Arabian Nights entertainment. In recent years, the Metropolitan Opera in New York has revisited the correct costuming. The earlier orders of chivalry practiced 3 degrees or grades of chivalry. Candidates first became pages, then squires, and finally knights. After the mingling of the old military fraternities with such mystical sects as the Albigenses and the Ghibellines, the number of degrees was increased. In some groups there was as many as 33 grades, somewhat similar to the structure of modern Freemasonry. The romances of the Round Table, the Holy Grail, and the Circle of Charlemagne certainly originated in the esoteric teachings of the Nordic, Gothic, and Celtic Rite. Such legends as those of Parzival, King of the Grail, and the Swan Knight Lohengrin, his son, are veiled reports of the secret schools of the Adepts. Wagner's interpretation of the Grail cycle, though based upon early traditions, were largely colored by his own mystical convictions. As he glorified the orders of chivalry in his Grail operas, so he dignified the guilds which had the same origin. In his Meistensinger of Nuremberg, the knight initiates of the Brotherhoods of the Quest performed vigils, cultivated visions, and lived by rules and regulations as rigid as any monastic order. They had signs and passwords and were bound together by secret vows and obligations. They were dedicated to the protection of the weak, the preservation of righteous peace, and the perpetuation of certain spiritual and philosophical secrets. When the Inquisition accused the Knights Templars of worshiping demons and practicing obscene and abominable rites, these accusations merely referred to the pagan doctrines held in secret by this order of chivalry. After the destruction of the Templars, the esoteric tradition of Europe disappeared from public view to be reinstated cautiously in the curious terminology of the alchemist, the Kabbalist, the Rosicrucians, and even the astrologers. The Order of the Quest gave place to the Order of the Great Work. The elixir of life in the alchemical bottle is identical in meaning with the blood of Christ in the holy chalice. Even the dragons and monsters of the hero myths survived in the hieroglyphical drawings of the alchemical philosophers. Charlemagne with his 12 peers is Odin, the Grand Master of Drotts, seated in his council with his 12 Ases in the high and secret palace of Asgard. The brave Lord Roland is Tammuz, Dionysus, Sigurd, Balder, Sir Galahad, and Robin Hood. All these gallant champions of the human cause, these defenders of the weak, these princes of the philosophic empire, these soldiers of spiritual democracy personified the initiates of the mystery schools. The adept is the eternal hero of the world. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.